And what I found is that it almost always deals with improper mineralization and dehydration, that their brain, that the psilocybin, because it's activating their brain in new ways, that it's causing more brain activity that you suggest, and it's exposing the fact that they're a little dehydrated. Mushrooms, adaptogens, aminos, cacao. And we've been researching for quite a while now, every single ingredient that can benefit a micro and a macro dose into a kind of ceremonial cacao and Ceylon cinnamon base.
Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you to become an age hacker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we live young for a lifetime? Now, here's today's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, and we are here, curious as always, about how good we can be. How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? How do we live young for a lifetime? Really interesting question, quite honestly. And how do we develop a 300/3,000-year-old mind? And today I'm going to have a conversation with a gentleman, Adam Schell. He's not a physician, he's not in the medical space, but he's an author who became enamored with the area of psychedelics. And we're going to go into a pretty far-ranging conversation on different psychedelics and mushrooms and psilocybin and microdosing these and the impact on the brain and flow states and function. I think you're going to find this a really, really interesting conversation. We go a lot of places with this one, so enjoy it. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. And today I'm being joined by a interesting character who's working on optimizing the brain through some ancient mechanisms, actually, which are pretty interesting. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to chatting it up.
Yeah. Adam, tell us a little bit about your personal journey. How did you get to the point where you're working with your proprietary mushroom blend?
Yeah, it kind of reads like a bit of a Netflix story.
Okay.
Failed novelist turned drug dealer turned mushroom expert.
Okay.
So I went to Northwestern University. I was a Big Ten linebacker. I majored in film and literature. I wrote a novel back in 2008, 2009. The novel sold for well over $1 million. It was a multi-book deal, but between the purchase of the manuscript and the release of the book itself, we had the whole publishing world implode in 2008, 2009. We had the economy, the housing crisis, and then it all culminated with the number 1, 2, and 3 at Random House, who all but my book got fired, and Michael Jackson died the day my novel came out. So it was like it never happened. Well, so it was kind of crazy timing. So I was writing, I was teaching yoga, I was training, side hustling stuff. And a friend of mine introduced me to the California cannabis industry. I didn't know anything about cannabis really at the time. Didn't have any issues with it, but I just wasn't much of a cannabis user. But I was kind of like, 40s and screwed up. What am I going to do now? So basically the bar in the industry at that time was so low that just competent and honest was the new extraordinary. And within 3 years, I had a statewide distribution company going. I had a security company, Sprinter vans, and I was making sitcom-like money. It was crazy. We were doing so well. But I had some psychedelic experiences early in my youth, in my early 20s, that I never forgot about. And when I was very flush with cash, one of the guys that worked for me that had a small grow operation, and he would do some driving as well, we started talking about psilocybin. And the word microdosing had just started first appearing. It's about 10 years ago now. And I said to him, I was very cash positive at the time. I said, hey, if I fund you out, you think you could grow mushrooms? He's a European guy. Turns out he came from 4 generations of mushroom foragers. He grew up with a country cottage where they would go mushroom foraging. And he's like, yeah, this is going to be like coming home to me. And literally within about 8 months, he was one of the best mushroom growers in the world. And we had all these different varieties of psilocybin mushrooms that we were growing simultaneously. We didn't want to do something shroomy or recreational. Not that I have a problem with that at all. I think it's so much better than alcohol and other things. I think mushrooms are great in a multitude of uses, but we really wanted to approach it from the standpoint of life optimization and wellness and microdosing. So we started to grow specific types of mushrooms in specific types of ways, blended with specific combinations of herbs, nootropics, amino acids, and so forth for this desired life optimization outcome. And about 3 or so years into the process, we really stumbled upon it. We developed our own. We had what I call a glorious mutation. The 4 different types of mushrooms we were growing seemed to mutate into the perfect one for our needs. For our needs as a microdosing company. And then we really came.
You're blending 4 different mushroom strains. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Originally, we had 4 different types of mushroom strains growing that we would use. And then we had this mutation. Say it again. Excuse me?
Which ones were they?
So we had albino penis envy, Texas teachers, hillbilly, and Shakti. Those were our original 4 strains.
Hillbilly, and what was the last one?
Shakti.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we had this mutation that seemed to represent some aspect of all of them, and we were able to propagate that. So that's now our proprietary mushroom that we built, our supplement.
So you basically built a new mushroom, is what you're saying.
Yeah. We had this mutation, and we were able to breed and propagate that. My partner's the mushroom expert, but we were able to breed and propagate that. So that's the type of mushroom that we use specific for our Brain Supreme product line. So during this time, then the cannabis industry completely collapsed, and I was like, okay, let's really go all in on the microdosing brand. And the industry collapsed so hard, I lost millions of dollars, scary losses. I bought into farms, and I was moved up to Northern California, and I was running the farms and running distribution. And we had 1 year of fires. We lost 50,000 projected pounds. The next year, there's no crop insurance, so I'm putting in good money after bad. And then next year, the day before harvest, we get this inverted atmospheric river. We have 13 days of rain, and we lose every single 50,000 projected pounds of harvest. We lose every single pound to mold. So 2 years, and at the same time, the distribution in the cannabis industry went from $1,000 a pound down to $350 a pound. Costs you $400 a pound to grow it, trim it, and pay the taxes on it. So I was literally ruined. I was terrified. I was upside down. I had lost all my money. I had lost investors and partners' money. I couldn't pay farmers. I couldn't pay workers. It was an absolute disaster. But we had created the Genius, our flagship product called Genius, which has this specific formula.
Specific formula
That we were working with.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Psilocybin. We had just developed this one type of mushroom that we had developed, and that literally saved my life.
Tell us about how the mushroom saved your life. I know you were going through a crisis financially, and of course.
I mean, I've never been prone to like addiction or abusive behavior, so I don't want to say like I was doing drugs or drinking or anything like that, but I was operating on about 3-4 hours of sleep a night. I'd have night sweats and terrors every evening. I was separated from my family because they had come to Texas to kind of get away from the craziness and stupidity of California and California COVID. I couldn't work my way out of the problems I was in because distribution had collapsed. So I had made my investment money by going up to the farms and buying product at $1,000 and selling it in the cities at $1,300 or $1,400, and we did amazing. But now you're trying to get it at the farms. The farms are trying to get $300, $400, $500 a pound, but the distribution centers in the cities are paying $250 a pound, $300 a pound. So everybody's upside down. It's a disaster. You're working for free. You couldn't. The supply, the supply and demand went completely out of sync. Supply was completely flooded. Demand had diminished. Supply was happening from other states. California used to control 80% of the cannabis grow in the country, and suddenly that drops to 55% because Washington, Oregon, Oklahoma, Michigan, Arizona, all these other states come online. And so now the black market, which really controls the whole entire cannabis industry, that collapses. Northern California is imploding, and I was incredibly depressed. I couldn't focus, I couldn't concentrate. But the development of Brain Supreme allowed me to compartmentalize my stress, manage on 4 hours of sleep a night, unwind the catastrophe that was California, relocate myself to Texas, rebuild the brand, rebuild my life, and really start to experience the success and growth that we're experiencing now. So personally, it helped me manage this extraordinary time of stress.
Yeah, well, that's great. When you look back at the history of psychedelics in general and mushrooms and things like that. There's so many interesting things that are being postulated, and they're being postulated. They're not necessarily fact, but postulations around how the use of some of these psychoactive agents like psilocybin, which becomes psilocin in the body, that it had an impact on our ancestors in a way that was kind of improving their perception and intelligence and some things like that. It seems like these mushrooms may be a part of the human neurological capability and capacity development that we have for, abstract thought and seeing things through different lenses and some of these kinds of things. I don't know if you've looked into any of that, but
Quite a bit.
it's kind of an interesting thing, right? It's
Yeah,
kind of,
Thomas McKenna goes so
yeah,
far as to
that's right.
suggest, and he's one of the godfathers of psychedelics. So McKenna goes so far as to suggest that human evolution was based on primates
Mm-hmm.
going down to the lowlands after rain and eating psychedelic psilocybin mushrooms out of the
Right.
different animal patties, out of the feces of the different animal patties that would sprout. And it was this spontaneous explosion of neurological firing and wiring and opportunity that basically caused the transformation of the primate brain into the human brain. So there's some people in the space that advocate that it's basically what caused human evolution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would go that far, but I do find it fascinating that so many of our religious holidays, religious teachers, prophets, sages, wise people seem to have some psychedelic revelry, festival. There was some engagement with psychedelics in part as part of their evolution and the evolution of their spiritual and religious identities and thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's right. When they go back now and they actually, the archaeology has really taken such a massive leap forward with quantum computing and analysis and things like that. And then the ability to actually use technologies like LiDAR and things like that to look into a jungle and see a city that's buried there and things like this, right? So, but anyway, when they go in and they start to excavate these temple sites or whatever, it's not unusual to find remnants of cannabis there or other psychoactive
Yeah.
agents,
Yeah.
right? It seems to have
Yeah.
been part of almost all the traditions, right?
Yeah. I mean, yep. Yeah. I mean, the Amanita muscaria and muscanol, that psychedelic from the Christmas
Mm-hmm.
mushroom, and the traditions of Siberia and the north. And then you have the burning bush, which could have been the Asahi, I think is how you pronounce it, bush, which the smoke releases psychedelic properties. And then you have the Elysian rites, where the Greek scholars and intelligentsia at that time would go to Elysia for these Elysian rites, and they've scraped out the barrels and they found remnants of psychedelics inside some of the ancient wine barrels and so forth.
That's
So
right.
yeah, it
That's right.
seems quite prevalent.
Yeah, it seems to be prevalent in the whole psychospiritual evolution of practice and things like that. It is interesting. There's some really interesting things that happen to the brain with psilocybin, and it has to do with kind of making neural connections that typically are not being made otherwise. Like the brain tends to run along certain highways, right? And you've got this default mode network that, most of your thoughts are kind of repetitive thoughts that are running on this particular highway. And then what happens is when you drop in something like psilocybin, same thing happens with LSD. Even mescaline will do similar things, activate some of the same H2-1A receptors. You can basically kind of start to rewire the connectivity in the brain, which enables people to actually start to see the world from a different vantage point, which I think is really one of the most interesting things. When we think about changing our life, there's a million podcasts, books, whatever that talk about, change the way you think and you change your life. The question is, how do you actually do that? Because when you think about something differently, just cognitively, it'll move the needle. But when you have access to something that enables you to experience and rewire the brain down other pathways, all of a sudden you can come out of that experience and now start to see the world differently in a more permanent kind of way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's been some of your experience, but
100%. Have you had any macro heroic journeying experiences? You have. Okay. Yeah. So you've experienced this. Great. So I use basically what I suggest the difference between the macrodose and the microdose is the macrodose turns the proverbial lights on. That you're in an abyss of darkness, your consciousness, your understanding of cosmology, mythology, you have maybe some preconceived notions, but you enter this heroic space, this psychedelic space, and the proverbial lights get turned on, okay? And your understanding of life, the way you view life, your own personal behavioral patterns, thoughts, cosmology, energy systems, everything kind of gets exposed. The lights get turned on. And as you come out of as you descend from the macro experience, the lights dim, but the pattern of the darkness is never the same.
That's right.
It's like you've walked into a hotel room, you're exhausted at midnight, the blackout screens are there, but you're going to knock your shins into the coffee table when you go to take a piss. But you flip the lights on even for a second and they go off, but now you know the pattern of the furniture. So even though it gets dark again, you can navigate the darkness a little bit better. And then the microdosing experience just continually walks you towards that light. Whether you've had the macro experience or not, certainly they work very well in conjunction with one another. But the macro experience turns the proverbial lights on, and the darkness is never the same. The micro experience just continues to walk you towards the light.
I think that's a good analogy. I think one of the things that I would say is that barriers that we normally have constructed as being real start to fall away. Like, particularly on a macro experience, when the plants, start talking to you, right? And you start connecting with people telepathically, and you start connecting to consciousness and things like this. I found that using, binaural deep theta meditation beats can be very, very stimulating as well. But the point is, it breaks down barriers. And if you have things like wachuma, right, which is mescaline from cactus, which is different than mushrooms, it also breaks down barriers. It breaks down the barriers that you have between yourself and other people. All of a sudden, you become really, really good friends with everybody in the room through a shared experience. And what's interesting about it is that you start to realize that we're all living in a construct that we kind of have bought into and said, well, this is just kind of how it is. But in actual fact, I think one of the stretching and beautiful things of these experiences is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it.
Yep.
And yes, there is an elasticity of being pulled back to your old self, but there's also a elasticity being pulled forward into your new self, if you will. So it's a really fascinating field.
Yeah, that's beautifully stated. Yeah. What have your kind of plant medicine? What have you worked with and experienced? And as a doctor and a scientist, can you quantify different ethnogenic medicines differently?
Yeah, the way that I got into this for the audience is I never really did any psychedelics growing up, right? I came out of a very Christian background, went to seminary, drank a little bit of alcohol. I think I eventually tried a bit of cannabis in medical school or something like that. It was interesting and fun. I actually have psychedelic experiences on cannabis. Genetically, I'm built that way. But it would mess with my memory. So I didn't like it, so I stopped using it. And there's genetic reasons for that also. We figured out ways to compensate for that.
Wow.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I don't really use these things on a regular basis. But then my partner, basically, who was finishing up a psychology degree at Naropa in Boulder, had a real passion to go into the field of psychedelic assisted therapies because there's so much work going on at so many major universities about using psilocybin, ibogaine, LSD, DMT experiences to basically help people rewire their brains and get over their post-traumatic stress or help them with their depression. And there's so many, and also help people that have terminal illness be able to face the rest of their life from a positive perspective as opposed to a woe is me perspective, right? So it's really powerful. Like, there is no drug in the pharmacopoeia that can do that, that I'm aware of, right? What the drugs do in pharmacies basically is to dull whatever's happening. But these, when you read about these studies, you start to understand, these people are expanding into something else.
Yep.
So anyway, through those connections, I ended up getting access to some of these things in legal ways, quite honestly. I'll just say that, in legal constructs inside of a church or temple or something like that, that had a dispensation to be able to administer these in a therapeutic way. And yeah, so, 5-MeO-DMT, ayahuasca, psilocybin, LSD, wachuma, mescaline, all these things
Wow.
I've played with, right? And
Yeah.
they all have a different flavor. That's why I
Mm.
was curious about your 4-in-1 concoction, because Golden Teachers is like a very sort of interesting psilocybin experience. It's very pleasant and educational. For me, the penis envy is just like so rough and harsh, and
Oh, really?
had evidence of times of paranoia and things like this. It's like, boys, I just don't really resonate with this molecule. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's
so
fascinating because that's largely thought of as the best recreational strain, as the most kind of body, mind, playful, fun combination.
yeah, not for me.
It's interesting. People ask me about that all the time, like which strain should I use and should I do? And I just say, like, look, I don't think anybody can really claim expertise on that, because your constitution, what you've eaten, what you're thinking, the room you're in, who grew those
Right.
mushrooms, what was the energy of the people handling them and packaging them. Like, there's so many other variables. Like,
That's right.
maybe there's some generalized sense. People say that albino penis envy is like the most fun and most playful, but here you are saying Golden Teachers were the easiest and most fun. And there's a lot of people who are like, I was just so in my head. And,
Mhm.
other people have very different, a lot of people talk about mushrooms. Like, if it's a thinner body and a bigger head, it's going to be in the head. And if it's a broader body and a smaller head, it's going to be much more body. But honestly, like, after 10 years in this space, like, honestly, fuck if I know. I mean, there's so many other variables that come into play.
I think if you're listening to this and you're curious about this, and you could find a way to kind of legally participate in these things, because you might have an issue that you're trying to deal with, you're going to have to go into it a little bit with an open mind. But there are some genetics tests that people can do to kind of get an idea of how they're going to respond. And that's particularly true for DMT experiences, because if you have strong MAO capacity, monoamine oxidase metabolizing capacity, you'll chew those things up really quickly. And so this is why ayahuasca is combined with an MAO inhibitor to actually sort of slow down the metabolism. But if
Right.
you're a fast metabolizer, you can still almost keep pace with it, right? So it's very, I think one of the things that's missing in this field from a therapeutic perspective is actually doing the genetic work on people to understand, okay, I see, this is going to be more likely for you to be this or that. And we'll adjust the dose or the pacing or whatever to keep you in a sweet sort of, let's call it a therapeutic space, as opposed to one that's either not therapeutic because it's too low or is beyond what it was you wanted to experience, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of interesting. Yeah, but it's a beautiful space. I've learned so much. I've really learned so much inside that space. Like, you can't unsee it once you see it, right? It's been really instrumental in a lot of personal growth for me, which I think is lovely. I mean, I'm here to grow and learn and expand into this 300-year-old mind that we talk about. 100-year-old body, 300-year-old mind is what we're going for when we're age 100. So expanding into that, maybe a 3,000-year-old mind. So expanding into that and rewiring the brain and having better perspective. The interesting thing is that these mushrooms also seem to enhance neuron growth. And I went and had an MRI scan about 4 years ago now, I think. And they looked at my brain and said, okay, well, it looks pretty good. So, it's good for your age kind of thing. And then I went back and had another one done now it's probably 3 or 4 months ago. And I had a lot more gray matter than I did previously. Yeah, like people's brains shrink over time, right?
Right.
But the gray matter, which is the cellular component of the neurons, right? The white matter is the myelin sheath and the axons, if you will, the connectors. But the cell bodies were increasing in their density. And I'm like, well, that's a good thing. And that's what's been shown with things like microdosing psilocybin or microdosing LSD or some of these other things, that you actually increase connectivity in the brain, and the brain starts to like it. You can boost it with other things too that boost BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or other neurotrophic things. So we've been working around things that would augment the use of microdosing to make it even better for the individual, right? So
That's
that
the next product we're coming out with.
okay,
It's called Max Stack.
okay,
Mushrooms, adaptogens, aminos, cacao. And we've been researching for quite a while now. Every single ingredient, I mean, and there's so many, but then we parse them down. Every single ingredient that can benefit a micro and a macro dose
mm-hmm.
into a kind of ceremonial cacao and Ceylon cinnamon base.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that you're saying that, because we're probably 3 or 4 months away from launching that product
Mm-hmm.
for exactly those purposes.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a noble thing. And the other thing that people need to realize is that when they're doing these microdose protocols, it's really 1 day on and 2 days off. It's not like you're doing it every single day. In other words, the brain needs time to recover. It is a workout for the brain. Like if you do a macrodose, your brain will be tired. Like it just ran a marathon. I mean, you're pumping out a lot of energy to, make those connections, create those, those experiences, if you will. And on the micro side, I think Paul Stamets was the one that started the 1 day on, 2 days off.
No, that's Dr. James Fadiman. Stamets is actually, we'll talk, he's expressed the Stamets protocol is either, depending on which podcast you hear him, it's either 4 days on and 3 days off, or 5 days on and 2 days off. The Fadiman protocol is 1 day on and 2 days off. When they finally first met in the early 90s at one of the MAPS conventions, they asked each other how they developed their protocol. And Stamets says, well, I have a lot of mushrooms, so I figured I shouldn't do them every day, but I can do them 4 or 5 days in a row. And Fadiman's like, well, I hardly get mushrooms because I'm in a university, so I have to be really sparse with them and frugal. So I do 1 day on and 2 days off. There's no science based in any of that. Right. They just pulled that out of their asses based on. Now, there is we at Brain Supreme, our standard protocol is 5 days on, 2 days off. And then we have performance dosing, which is either an every other day or 1 day on, 2 days off protocol. And then we have a peak day dosing protocol where you really understand your body and how to microdose, and you're just going to use it on peak days once a week, once every 2 weeks. You got a big workout or a big meeting at work, and you kind of learn how to use it. But even that, Jeffrey, it's so predicated upon neurological needs. Like I work with some. So look, high achieving, well-adjusted, successful human beings like yourself, possibly like myself, the every other day, 1 day on, 2 days off, 4 days on, 3 days off, like that's probably something good for guys like you and I, because it allows you to flush. You definitely certain experience the benefit.
Yeah, you can experience benefit, but then your brain does.
I work with some veterans, PTSD, major depressive disorder, combat veterans, and they don't want to take a day off. They'll run 6 months straight. And I've realized as a microdose coach, hey man, if you're getting the benefit and your brain needs it that much and it's creating anxiety for you to take your days off, just run it straight. The mushrooms, what happens with microdosing is the mushrooms have a sentient wisdom, and they will let you know how you should be interacting with them.
Yeah.
When you develop your awareness.
I think there's truth to that. I think, it's interesting you've created the stack that you have to support. We've created a stack also for all the different things. It's a little bit different than your stack. It's because it's focused on a little bit different part of the biology. But I think if you're listening to this, the point is you can just do this, I suppose. If you want to kind of support your body's ability to make BDNF or to increase, axon connections or things like that, you can actually turbocharge the effects of these things. Is kind of what we've figured out, right? Certain peptides, certain supplements. The next thing you know, it's kind of like you can go into these spaces where you're pretty clairvoyant and you can actually function at a very high level. So I think for me, it's what I'm an optimization kind of person, right? So it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. I wonder if we can make it better, right? It's kind of like, if I drive a car, it's like, oh, well, it's nice. But I wonder if we could make it better. Yeah, we can make it better. So you see what I'm saying? So I'm always kind of looking at that through that lens. And I think, but it's cool that you've made this. So tell us a little bit about your products. You have one strain that you've actually created that blends the benefits of 4 different strains. Are there other things that go along with that?
Yeah. So we have 4 different products currently. We have our flagship formula, Genius. And Genius combines 100 milligrams of psilocybin, what we call the Brain Supreme proprietary mushroom blend. That's
Yeah.
our term that we use out there, so we can sell online and
Right.
have our packaging. But it is psilocybin. That's our kind of secret code that we have with our subscribers and our clients and customers. Genius combines 100 milligrams of our proprietary psilocybin with 400 milligrams of nootropics, amino acids, herbs, and so forth. That's our most nootropic formulation. Then we have Feel Good. That's 100 milligrams of psilocybin blended with 400 milligrams of adaptogenic herbs that are really good for mood and libido and emotional well-being. It's kind of our emotional well-being formula. Then we have Athlete. That's our performance formula. That's 100 milligrams of active blended with 400 milligrams of natural testosterone boosters, cardiovascular support, recovery, so forth. And then we have Black Stack. That's our extra strength. That's 300 milligrams of active ingredient blended with nanocurcumin, really high quality vitamin C, and ginger. So that's our extra strength. And, I tell most people, essentially microdosing for me, what I find, it's a slightly expensive supplement that you should notice. You should have a 5, 10%, 15% kind of bump in your overall neurocognition, efficacy, mood, libido, patience. We get a lot about witness consciousness, which is what you were referring to earlier. That, you're not your thought, you're the witness to your thought, you're not your body, you're the witness to your body. Like it just helps you develop some space, so you're not quite as attached and volatile and reactive. We get a lot of feedback along those lines. The formulas, the secret ingredient seems to do most of the heavy lifting. It's the different formulations, people will react kind of differently to them. I tend to stack. I do the performance protocol because I'm very into fitness and I like to train and work out very, very hard. So I go a Monday, Wednesday, Friday protocol where I go a little heavier. I'll take 2 Genius and 2 Athlete about an hour before my workout. So I go with a 400 milligram microdose, and my workouts are flow state. I have a lot of athletes, professional athletes, amateur athletes, and they will do 1 practice day and 1 game day on the performance protocol. I always tell people, figure it out on practice day. Don't do it during game day until you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But most people will start. I tell most people start with Genius. That's our flagship. That's our bestseller. The reviews are incredible on it. It's highly effective. And then from Genius, you can kind of expand outward and play with your protocols and so forth. But start with the supplement protocol. We have this, our coaching protocol works with demystify, familiarize, personalize. First, if you carry any stigmas, you got to demystify that. It's not a big deal. It's a slightly expensive supplement that you should notice. There's no known counter. It tends to work synergistically with pharmaceutical products, all other supplements, and so forth. So start very small, just demystify, and then start to familiarize yourself with the products. Like, hey, I think I like to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with 1 capsule, Thursday, Friday, I scale to 2 capsules, I take the weekend off. And then you might have some high performance alpha types. They're very into fitness. I really like the performance protocol because it puts me in flow states for my workouts. So I take a microdose. I take 3 Feel Good on Tuesday and Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, my 2 main training days. So then once you're familiarized, you really start to personalize your process of microdosing. And there really isn't any right way to go about it.
No, that's right. I think you want to listen to your body on it.
100%.
And sleep becomes very important as well. You want to have good sleep because it is your brain is doing more work when it's interacting with the psychoactives, right? Which is cool because it's actually upregulating brain function. But there's also a certain amount of work that's being done. So that's where getting good sleep to recover, things like that become very important.
Here's something I'd like to...
on the microdose.
Oh, okay. Well, you go first because I'm going to remember my question. So finish your thought, please. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's fine. I was just going to say, when it comes to microdosing, 100 milligrams is probably considered a pretty normal microdose, 100, 200 milligrams. When we get to a point of like 300 or 400 milligrams, we're starting to talk about what we call a macro-micro. I call
that the recreational range. So for me,
it's macro-micro. In other words, you're going to feel that at 400. Yeah. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. But I find if you do it an hour before you work out, you burn that feeling off. And then the benefits of the microdose linger throughout the day and the next day, and then you go again. That flow state dosing is amazing.
That's cool. I like that. I love flow states. I mean, I think everybody that accesses those loves them.
Do you know you want to know it's interesting about flow state? One of my fastest growing sectors of new clients, new customers are middle-aged pickleballers. and they all
Oh,
do
wow.
performance dosing because they're so competitive. They love the sport so much,
I
and the
know.
ball seems huge. Their reaction time, life
Right.
just slows down. Their
Yep.
processing slows down. I mean, they're processing
Processing
faster,
speeds up. Right. So
but
that's
their
everything.
processing speeds up. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting. Here's one thing I want to run by you with the prolific amount of education and research that you seem to have in this field, a real expert. It's wonderful to speak with you about these things. So when I do my microdose coaching, the only real side effect that I ever get, there's two. There's sleepiness on the first week or so of microdosing, and there's
Mhm.
occasional headaches. And what I have found over the 3,000 plus conversations as a microdose coach, as I've been developing this brand, the coaching came as a result of just having hundreds and hundreds and now thousands of conversations as I was hand selling these things and calling everybody for feedback 2 days later and so forth, is a sleepiness and headache. And what I found is that it almost always deals with improper mineralization and dehydration. That their brain, that the psilocybin, because it's activating their brain in new ways, that it's causing more brain activity that you suggest, and it's exposing the fact that they're a little dehydrated and they don't have good
Mhm.
salts and minerals. So I'm batting 1,000% with this. Whenever somebody's sleepy or they get headaches, I say, drink more water, good water, filtered water, make
Yeah.
sure you have a good filtration, try to get the fluoride out and so forth. Add high quality electrolytes, add high quality salt to your diet. Baja Gold or Celtic
Mhm.
salt is what I recommend. And
Mhm.
then add a magnesium complex, one in the morning and then a little heavier at night, something like Bio Optimizer's Magnesium Breakthrough. And I'm batting 1,000 that the headaches and sleepiness go away. So I was curious, like,
Great. I like to hear that.
does that sound like, from your understanding of neuroanatomy and psilocybin, does that sound kind of like
Yeah.
right on as a diagnosis and remedy?
Yeah, it does. It works on the brain in certain ways. The way that we think about it, what we've had success with is boosting NAD and decreasing oxidative stress with molecular hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do
Do
that,
you like the bottles or do you like the new tablets that go in the water? What do you think is more effective?
we like the tablets because you get a higher concentration and they're
Okay.
portable. So yeah,
Who
we
who
have
do
a
you
product.
do you
We
do
have a
with
product
the?
that we developed.
Oh, you
It's
have a
called,
product. Is it on
it's
the
called
is it on the market?
yeah, it's called
Oh, great.
H2 Energy.
Oh,
We
awesome.
have another one called H2 Chill. So you can take H2 Energy at the beginning when you're going to play pickleball or go for your mountain bike ride or whatever flow state you want to get into, and then later in the day you can take the H2 Chill, and it's full of magnesium, right? The
Oh,
tablets
well,
are
there
full
we
of
go.
magnesium, right? And so that's easy. And then we like to boost NAD because it is a workout for the brain, and so we use a couple different supplements to boost NAD: Nuchito Time and Vitality, and we combine it with some apigenin. And when you do that, you're basically boosting your mitochondria's ability to make ATP, and the hydrogen is basically taking care of the reactive oxygen species that are generated in making the ATP. So it's a kind of a sweet combination. There's a few other things we add to it as well, depending on what we're trying to do, but those two are kind of at the heart of it. Yeah.
That sounds great.
hmm
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, I could set you up with some of the H2 stuff.
Yeah, I'd love it. And we'll talk after all when because we blast all our podcasts out to our email subscriber list, so maybe we can kind of swap discount codes or something because I'm sure my
Perfect.
people would be fascinated.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, let's do that. Awesome, Adam. Well, congratulations on what you're doing. Um, I think it's a field that's very important, quite honestly. We also know some people that are doing microdosing with wachuma, which is from cactus, which is
Mm.
mescaline, and getting some really interesting results with that, where they're able to help people get off their ADD medications and things like that,
Yeah.
combining microdosing wachuma one day with microdosing either psilocybin or LSD, taking a day off kind of thing, going back and forth. It's kind of a custom fit as to how you put those together. But they work a little bit differently in the brain. One of the things about the wachuma is that it is an unbelievably social molecule in that it really tears down um, the separation that we feel. In a spiritual sense, we're all connected, right? I mean, it's just we're really all connected, and yet we walk down the street feeling isolated, and there's a sense of the other and a sense of us. What the Wachuma does is it breaks down all those barriers. It's just like, oh no, I don't know if you ever read this story by Andy Weir called "The Egg." Did you ever read
Oh
that?
yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that story, he's killed in a car crash and he goes to heaven or wherever he goes, and then God is showing him all this stuff. And at the end of the story, it's really, you can look it up on, if you're listening to this, go look it up on Google or whatever. It's a short story. You can read it in 10 minutes. But at the end, he has this epiphany that actually we're everybody,
Yeah.
right? And that was such a game changer for me when I read that. It's like, no, I'm you and you're me. And it's, so if you're me, because we're connected spiritually, it's like, hey, Adam, how you doing? Right? How are you doing? Right? Because there's a sense of care and connection there that you wouldn't have. And that was a cognitive insight that I had. But then with things like the Wachuma, it becomes an experiential reality. It's like, hey, Adam, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's this connection, this sense of connection that develops. It's incredibly super sweet, especially for humans as we get more and more isolated on our phones and electronics and all the other stuff. And yes, flow states are great and cognitive ability is great, but it's really great to have sort of community, if you will, with people and kind of take down the barriers. So that's kind of a cool thing too.
I can build on that in a very personal way. Like if people ever ask me, I've been microdosing now pretty much 7 years. When people ask me like, have you noticed any long-term benefit? Like the single most profound long-term benefit that I've noticed is what I call the etheric mycelial field. So, mycelium, you know this, but for listeners out there, that's the root fibers of the mushrooms, and they interconnect the virus and they can relay information. The movie Fantastic Fungi does a great job illuminating how the mycelial networks of the forest. But what I found after 7 years of microdosing is what I call the etheric mycelial field. So from my heart and from my mind, I feel these fibers go out, and they just connect me with people in deep, meaningful, and profound ways. It's often the relationships are intuitive, they're incredibly meaningful. And like, I'll know when to give. Now I know when to receive. And then I'll also know when the root fibers are just not going anywhere and just cut your losses. It's not happening. So exactly what you're saying in terms of this more meaningful interconnectivity with all life, humans, nature, everything. I've noticed that profoundly in my own life.
Oh, that's cool. I love hearing that. Yeah, and to your point, it is humans, but with some of these other experiences, particularly on some of the macro, you do get connected with all life, right? All of it, like all of it. Even alien life or wherever life is, you get connected to all of it when you go out there far enough. It's pretty amazing.
I have one thing that let me run this by you. I've been talking about this a lot recently. I had a psychedelic experience and I kind of realized this. For me, psilocybin works on a vertical corridor. So it's the morphogenic energy of the earth, the Akashic records, wisdom of the earth compressed into this mushroom. That energy explodes into you and opens up the consciousness, so your vertical column, the connection to the heavens. And then it very much becomes a vertical conversation from the heavens through you to the earth, back and forth, so that you here on earth in this plane are more healthy, happy, well adapted to live a full life on this earth plane. The other psychedelics, LSD and DMT and so forth, they tend to work on a horizontal plane a little more. So shit comes in that's completely wild from like the outside. That's not necessarily of this earth or seemingly of the heavens. It's horizontal plane that you're kind of entering into.
It's either personally, it's either horizontal or it's spherical on some level, where it's going in every direction.
Yeah. But do you have any like thoughts on my kind of the vertical axis versus more of the horizontal axis?
It's an interesting construct, right? I think I will say that, with psilocybin, you're very present, right? You're very much present. You're present to what is, you're present to the person or the people that you're with. You're present to the music that's playing. You're very present to the sand under your feet or the ocean that you just dove into or the clouds that you're looking at. So there's a really strong sense of being connected and present. I think in some of the other things like 5-MeO or ayahuasca or things like that, it's not that you're not connected, but you're actually going other places. Right? It's not like you're really connected to the other people in the room. You're out someplace, right? You're in hyperspace someplace.
I had a recent experience with an NN-DMT pen. That's the spirit. 5-MeO is the God molecule. The NN is the spirit molecule. Okay. And it's very short. It's like 20-minute experience. But
that's right.
Dude, I was in a fractal zone of ancient Phoenicia. I know of ancient Phoenicia, but like I don't think about it. I never thought I had a past life experience, but literally I was in ancient Phoenicia energetically, like with my wife, with my kids, something to do with ships. And there was this entity, this ancient Phoenician entity that didn't feel right, that visited me and offered me all this prosperity. And I said, you don't really feel right to me. See you later. And it sizzled and went away. And when I came back to the beams in my house right behind me, they have a little texturing to them. They were these Phoenician ships that were just whoosh, whoosh, just rowing back and forth. The beams had this life, and the beams were talking to me. They're like, we've been around a long time. Yeah. Like this wood here, this is seen a lot of eons and eons and eons, and it was wild.
Yeah, no, there's wild stuff like that. I think it really will take reality and bend it, distort it, reinvent it. All of a sudden, it's unrecognizable on some level. And I think this idea of fractal patterns, I don't know if you've been tracking what's going on in the quantum computing space, but have you heard of the Omega Code?
Yeah, I've heard of the Omega Code, and I have my own theory about how it relates to Danny Goler and the DMT experiments and what they're finding, like this code, this field of superconsciousness that exists beyond our perceptible layer of consciousness.
That's right. And so in the quantum computing, they're now beginning to understand that consciousness doesn't arise from structure. Its structure arises from consciousness. And the structure that arises with the Omega Code is, and they're actually testing this now, that there's a single equation. It's a fractal, it's a recursive equation, a mathematical equation that spontaneously creates, and it just spontaneously creates. And so the idea is now what they've done is they've actually, through the quantum computing chips, they've identified this equation that they think can actually bring together all the different activities in the universe. And so they've gone back and retroactively looked at it and applied it, kind of like you would look back at the stock market and say, oh, well, what equation would fit what's happening? But now they're taking the Omega Code, and really over the next couple of months, they're looking at, can we predict what's happening with solar flares, with, gas giants blowing up or whatever, neutron stars or supernovas or whatever? Can we actually predict what's happening out there utilizing this equation? So it's a really interesting time that we live in, where everything that we thought we knew,
right,
we don't really know. If you're listening to this and this whole thing sounds pretty crazy or out there, I have to tell you that in physics, they took a quantum computer chip and they basically put together general relativity with quantum mechanics, which of course they've been trying to do for over 100 years, right? So you've got Einstein's theory of relativity, which doesn't really account for what happens at the microscopic plane. And then you've got the microscopic plane that doesn't really account for what happens in the large plane, right? And so in relativity, nothing goes faster than the speed of light. In the quantum plane, two particles can be entangled and they can be 1 million light years away. And when one changes, the other changes instantaneously, right? So they've never been able to figure out, well, how is that happening? They stick the quantum computer on it, and it basically put it all together in a 6-dimensional construct, mathematical construct, right? So my point is that as humans, we think we know stuff, and yet what we know is we kind of know what we know. I think what's fascinating to me are all the things we don't know that would make our knowing of them better in this life, right? I think that's a really, really fascinating thing. And so the work that you're doing, the space that you're working in, is, bumping into that, right?
Yeah.
It's bumping into that. So it's all very cool. Yeah. Cool. Well, listen, Adam, it's a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. If you would like more information on what we've discussed or other topics, please reference the show notes or go to gladdenlongevitypodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter by searching Gladden Longevity. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to get future episodes delivered to you and share our podcast or this episode with someone in your life that you may find benefit. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode. The Gladden Longevity Podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The use of any information and materials linked to this podcast is at the listener's own risk.